Okay. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take the aggregate demand curve and merge it with monetary policy, just like we did with fiscal policy in the last chapter. So what I want you to do is I want you to get the monetary policy and aggregate supply, aggregate model note sheet. Now there's a worksheet there too. Don't get that one yet. I just want you to get the note sheet. So get that out, because what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and do just what we did with the fiscal policy. We're going to line up and show you what monetary policy does. So if we're in inflation and if we're in recession, what are we going to do? Well, remember, inflation, we want to take the money away from the people, so we're going to have tight money policy. If we're in a recession, we want to have as much money out there as the people as we possibly can, so we're going to have easy monetary policy. So that's when we would use those two. When the aggregate demand curve is here, we're doing tight. When the aggregate demand is here, we're doing easy. When the aggregate demand is here, we leave it alone. Or anyway, they should leave it alone. All right, now which one works? Here we go again. In this case, in fiscal policy, remember we had our smiling pumpkin down here. We don't. Yeah, we got our skull and crossbones. The smiling pumpkin's up here. So the question is, why? Well, for this first one, down here in easy money policy, I want you to think of the phrase, you can drag a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. All right? When we're in a recession, what are the chances you're going to take out a new loan for a new car or a new mortgage for a new house? Not very likely, because we're in a recession. People are losing jobs. We've got a lot of incomes going down. So we don't like the idea of putting more money out there just so we can go ahead and get repossessed or evicted or something like that. So we're very conservative at this point. So the Federal Reserve may make it as easy as possible for us to get, but people aren't going to go ahead and go, oh yeah, now I'm going to go ahead and take advantage of that. Because our mindset is we're in a recession, I got to save, so I'm not going to be spending. No matter how much money the banks have, they can't force you to sign on the dotted line on a new loan. So that's why the money's there, but it's not going to work very well in a recession. On the other hand, if you remember in fiscal policy, the politicians get fired, but monetary policy works really well here. Now, why? Well, very simple. Remember the Fed board members? They're there for a 12-year term. And they're not all replaced at once. Every 2 years, a member of the Federal Reserve is either resubmitted to stay on the Federal Reserve, or a new member is sent to the Senate to be confirmed for the Federal Reserve. And then the Senate decides what they're going to do. So every 2 years, one of them's being replaced. And that's for continuity, so you don't get rid of all of them. You have a way that the Federal Reserve goes. Very different from politics. Okay? Because first off, you could replace everybody if you wanted to. And then who knows what they're going to do with fiscal policy. But for monetary policy, you always have 6 that know what's going on. And the 7th one comes in, and even if that person is totally different from the other 6, they're only 1 vote in 7. So they can't turn things totally around and make a mess out of things. So they're there for 12 years, so they can't be fired. Nobody can put pressure on them because they're there for 12 years. They can't be unelected. And the president and Congress can't fire them. And if they do a good job, when they leave the Federal Reserve, they're probably going to become some board member somewhere making a high 6, low 7-figure salary. So they're in the canary seat. They don't care if we all of a sudden get hit with higher interest rates because we're driving up the price of stuff and we're driving inflation? We're meaning we the people. The Federal Reserve says, enough of that nonsense, we're just going to take the money away from you so you don't have it to spend. So we all of a sudden drop down here. Now, the tools. As you remember, for tight monetary policy, sell, raise, 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 and talk tight. For easy, buy, lower, 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 and talk easy. Okay? Same concept we used in the other spot. So this is what your sheet should look like. Alright? Now, let's go ahead and get the monetary policy and ADAS model worksheet. Okay? So what we want to do is I want you to go ahead and take a look at this, and then I want you to pause the lecture, work the problem, and restart the lecture. Now, here's the situation. Shop owners are able to raise and lower prices as their inventories change from surplus to shortage and back again over and over. So the first thing you need to do, go back to that aggregate demand, aggregate supply model, find out if this says you're here, here, or here. Then, where does the demand curve? It's going to go here, it's going to go here, it's going to go here. And then answer the other 5 or the other 4 questions depending on if it's here, or if it's here. So, pause the lecture and restart it once you've done this. Alright, now that you're back, this is what it should look like. Okay? Shop owners are able to raise and lower prices and seem to be selling everything they make. Okay? It's going up, it's going down, they can get rid of shortages, they can get rid of surpluses. Sounds like the invisible hand's working fine, doesn't it? So that's why we're in this area. And because we're here, we don't do anything else. And everybody's fat, dumb, and happy. Good. Oh man, yeah, because remember, one of the decisions can be we don't do anything. The number one thing you have to do, are we here, are we here, are we here, and then what do we do? Alright, so now here is fiscal and monetary on the same sheet. Alright, blue, we've got contractionary fiscal policy, we've got expansionary fiscal policy. Red, easy money, monetary policy, tight monetary policy. First thing to look at is, guess what? One of them's going to work here, even though the other one doesn't. And down here, one of them's going to work here, even though the other one doesn't. That's why they both have to go ahead and remember where their jobs are and how to do this kind of stuff. Right? You hear, we're in a recession, and you hear the federal government complaining that the Federal Reserve isn't doing enough. Well, the Federal Reserve can't. In a recession, the government has to do the nudging. The Federal Reserve just supplies the extra fuel once the government nudges us to spend more money. Up here, you know, unless you're retiring from Congress or it's your second term as president, you don't want to do this because you know you're not going to get reelected. But guess what? They can do it with no problem. So here's where you take a look and understand what the federal government and what the Federal Reserve should be doing and why they're doing it that way. A lot of folks on TV and in the newspapers don't understand this and try to go ahead and sell you a bill of goods. So what I want you to do now is I want you to get the fiscal and monetary policy ADS model worksheet. Because this one, what we're going to look at is, here's the situation. People are spending all kinds of money, but production's not growing. Are we here? Are we here? Are we here? And what kind of monetary policy and tools and stuff, and what kind of fiscal policy and tools and stuff are we going to use? So again, pause the lecture, work the problem, restart the lecture. Okay, now that you're back, People are spending all kinds of money, but production's not growing. Remember, GDP is production. If it's not growing, we must be right here, and we're spending all kinds of money, so guess what's happening? We're in that inflation zone. So that's the first part. That's where we are. Right? Second question, what fiscal and monetary policy would we use? Well, we'd use tight monetary policy and contractionary fiscal policy. What tools would these policies use to move the economy? Right? Open market, reserve, discount, interest, that should say jawboning there too. Sell, raise, and talk tight. And we got taxes and spending. We're going to raise and lower, and the liberal and conservative are going to do that. That kind of brings us down to number 6. Hey, nothing's going to happen to the Federal Reserve guys. They're going to get in their limo at the end of the day and drive home. Of course, the politician's going to get fired. So if you understand how this works, you now get an idea of fiscal policy from last week, monetary policy from this week, using the aggregate demand, aggregate supply model to decide how we're going to do this. And another way to let us know whether we're here, here, or here is the business cycle. Okay? And remember, the business cycle gives us a target dollar number. Remember, we're trying to figure out how much spending should I reduce, how much spending should I increase. We get that from Okun's Law and the business cycle and unemployment. That's why we put all of this together. That's how it goes from figuring out what GDP is, to taking a look at the business cycle, unemployment, inflation, then going to the aggregate demand, aggregate supply model, going into fiscal policy and monetary policy. That's the key parts of macroeconomics right there. And that's what we've got.